Hi there, I'm Lillian. Welcome to my channel. Here I talk about what it's like to wake up and find out that you're married to a covert narcissist, how I was baited through love bombing, trapped by a trauma bond, and stuck, blind, in a kind of Stockholm syndrome for 34 years. Here, I share my journey of healing that released me from my captivity in hopes that God will use me as an example to any sister in Christ that might be stuck, like I was, unable to tell the difference between love and abuse. That you will allow our God to heal and restore your feminine heart so that you'll be able to see the difference between a difficult husband and a dangerous man. Today I'm going to talk about being unequally yoked. It had never occurred to me that you could be unequally yoked and not see that you are. If you're married to a dangerous man like I was, make no mistake, you are unequally yoked. You just don't know it because it's being hidden from you. If you do an internet search with the words unequally yoked, you'll soon find out that submission is the only solution offered so that you can become equally yoked. It doesn't matter if you find the information in a blog, a book, a podcast, or on YouTube. The solution is always the same for Christian wives. Without knowing anything about the husband or wife and the particular flavor of their marriage, oh my stars, it's completely irresponsible to deliver cookie-cutter counsel with only one decisive solution based on the same ineffectual, tired information. It's just wrong. Christians have been using this regurgitated information, even though it hasn't proved to be any better counsel than exactly what the world offers, which is why all the marriage problems are the same and the divorce rate is climbing to be equal with that of the world. Instead of teaching the whole scripture that's woven together into a biblically cohesive solution that's clear and workable for every wife, it's being compartmentalized. In their efforts to remain contemporary, Christian leaders and authorities have taken biblical truth about men, women, and marriage and stuffed them into worldly casings. So now, instead of Christian marriages being in the world and not of it, with the purpose of mirroring Christ and the church, they look exactly like marriages that are in the world. Does your marriage represent Christ and his body, or does it mirror the world? Is there an actual one flesh relationship that's emulating Christ and the church, regardless of being in the world or at home? Or is your experience of marriage different inside the home versus outside the home? These are keys to the kind of headship you've got in the marriage that are indicators of being equally or unequally yoked. One of the themes that always comes up in Christian marriage teaching is from 2 Corinthians 6. Don't get yourself unequally yoked. I'll call it part A. It says, do not be yoked together with those who do not believe. Instead of teaching the truth that includes all of the verses, they parse it into elemental academics. They remove the practicality of God's word, which talks about the reality that in marriage, a sheep and a wolf can't actually be in a one-flesh relationship, because what partnership is there between righteousness and lawlessness? What fellowship does light have with darkness? What does a believer have in common with an unbeliever? They leave that part out, which is unhelpful at best, but deadly at worst. By leaving it out, they fail to teach why you shouldn't be unequally yoked, nor do they teach how to go about not becoming unequally yoked. How to tell if your boyfriend or fiance or husband is orienting from lawlessness instead of righteousness, from darkness instead of light. How to tell if the man you're married to is a wolf instead of a sheep. Does he have the real light from true fruit, Or is he faking with a mask of Christianese and Christian good works to cover his darkness? What does the headship in my marriage feel like? When you're married to a wolf, you are living in that humanly impossible situation that God describes in 2 Corinthians 6. He says it right there. It's an impossibility. Christian teaching, preaching, and education drives wives over the edge by convincing them that they can do the impossible, even though God says they can't. Instead of teaching feminine solutions on what being unequally yoked looks like, solutions for what happens when you do find yourself unequally yoked, they're educating wives from a false presupposition that says the dividing line for being unequally yoked is if the husband is a sheep that's either awake or a sheep that's still sleeping, aka not saved. So, by their definition, all unbelieving husbands are merely sleeping sheep. No wolves or goats or tares inside the church. That lie is rounded out nicely with the worldly quote that says, hurting people hurt others. And then you've got a lovely nesting ground for evil to be acceptable as it intentionally hurts another person. My sister, this is why no one believes you. In part 3, I talked about being set in a pew and being expected to act like everyone else, even though my situation at home in my marriage was destroying me from the inside out. I looked like every other wife sitting in the pew, but inside of me, there was a kind of live virus growing that was consuming my heart, my mind, and my soul. We wives have only been given one tool. We've been treated like cookie-cutter entities that merely fill a role in marriage. Marriage is viewed as a commodity instead of a community of two. Successful teaching bends to the student, not the other way around. But our education system refuses to apply this method of teaching. Students are a commodity, not individuals with their own learning styles. That's the premise of our education system. 10 to 20% of students learn in lecture style. Yet over 80% of children don't learn this way. And every child that goes to school is expected to be successful, even though they're flying blind all the way through from grade 1 through grade 12. Church culture has so immersed itself in the world that they follow the same methodology as the education system. The same as business models out in the world as well, but I'm comparing the actual education system because I'm talking about it from a teaching perspective. Groups and programs. You ever notice the disparity between lay involvement versus the rest of the congregation? It's generally 20 to 80. The church even gears her structure around the education system. All of the programs in church start in September and they end in June, proving to make the world system more prevalent than God. Christianity's teaching on relationships in marriage follows the same methodology as the secular system of education. All the teaching is geared to only teaching of the roles in marriage, production and tasks and division of labor. Even though it's two individual people embodying testosterone and estrogen for the one flesh relationship to happen, religion only has that one bent of roles. This has been detrimental for femininity. You have to use different tools that are suited to the feminine versus the masculine, instead of treating wives like cookie-cutter entities that merely fill a role. So, instead of teaching the whole truth in love and knowledge that's inclusive of femininity, which was God's intention by creating the feminine creature who's completely different than the masculine creature, The Christian culture, being exactly like the world, has killed her femininity by reshaping her estrogen into testosterone. They've done it through subversive cherry picking. You start with 3 scoops of "Don't be unequally yoked" from 2 Corinthians 6:14a, then cover that with a thick and blinding sauce, blended with more snippets from 1 Peter 3 verse 1a, Colossians 3:18, and Ephesians 5:22 that says you have to submit. Then sprinkle it with a generous amount of "Don't talk" from another snippet in 1 Peter 3:1b, and finally top it with a cherry from Ephesians 5:33b that says always respect your husband no matter how he acts or treats you. And then you've got a perfect recipe for a mush that does nothing to truly nourish a feminine's heart, mind, and soul. It's just sugary poison that she ingests on a regular basis, invisibly killing her just a little bit more every day through incongruency and confusion. That's it. That's the best they've got for a wife in a Christian marriage when she's unequally yoked. You know what? It's not enough. It's never been enough, and it never will be, because it's wrong. They've put the puzzle together wrong, and they're forcing parts that don't fit because they don't take into account the whole individual. Just because one part is female and the other part is male, that doesn't mean they fit together right. You have to look at the picture you're creating. It's like they've turned all the puzzle pieces upside down, so only the back is showing, like the cardboard beige part is showing. And then they've just put them together willy-nilly. Yep, insy-outsy, wife-husband. Insy-outsy, wife-husband. Then expect a beautiful picture on the other side. That's why divorce rates are equal to the world. Sorry for mixing my metaphors there. A woman cannot be an authentic and honest female in marriage if she's relegated to exist only in the role of a wife. That means she's only allowed to interpret and understand through masculine lens. If, in Christian marriage, as we say, it's one man and one woman, then we need a complete understanding of both the masculinity of a man and the femininity of a woman to accurately ascertain how God intends for the one flesh relationship to be lived out in an ongoing dynamic experience. Submission is not the answer for anything having to do with a one flesh relationship. In fact, submission is the opposite of feminine authenticity. We wives need to stop listening to outcome-based teaching and counsel for relationships. This is the masculine understanding. It's not been nefarious. I mean, yes, for wolves, of course, but not difficult men who are healthy, good-hearted guys. They just lack the knowledge of the feminine. It's not a patriarchal problem, as the feminist casts over all men. Not all masculinity is toxic. Only wolves are. God set up the hierarchical structure in all of his creation, every bit of it. So submission belongs in the hierarchy and is good. We just have to have it in the hierarchical sphere of the marriage roles, where the structure of marriage is, not in the one flesh relationship. Romance and love grows into the marriage organically through the one flesh relationship. It's a development of a banquet meal. Think of the roles in marriage as a table with legs, and the one flesh relationship as everything else that sits on top of the table. All the beverages, whatever they are, all the appetizers, whatever they are, all the main courses, whatever they are, and all the desserts, whatever they are. All the options that sit upon that table, that's the marriage. They are what nourishes the relationship, what keeps it alive and growing. The relationship is not the structure. It's not the legs or the table surface. All of our current Christian teaching about marriage said that there's no difference between the table and the meal that sits upon the table. Do you see? It is true for masculinity because men are task-oriented and outcome-based in their thinking. But it cannot be true for femininity. She's not nourished through the provision of the table and the legs, but through the consumption of the meal. The function of the table is not the same as the experience of the meal. Us females have been taught to think in the masculine instead of the feminine. We've been taught to reroute all of our needs, wants, and desires through a masculine mindset and experience, doing the tasks found in the role of a wife. We've denied the truth of what's needed for the femininity that God created within our estrogen. You can't be authentic if you're lying to yourself about what your femininity needs and what you want as an individual who symbolizes a female form in order for that one flesh relationship to exist with a creature that's in male form. A healthy man wants you to be authentic in your femininity. He just doesn't know what it looks like because men have been receiving the same faulty, incomplete information, so they're just as confused as we are. But when you begin to heal and embrace your femininity, he will respond in a positive masculine way. If your husband is a dangerous man, it will seem to get better at first. It will seem like he wants to build that table and collaborate on meal creation and dining with you. But in reality, he is recalibrating himself to different techniques and better strategies because healing your femininity has now changed you. You are stronger. So he has to up his game because that's what testosterone does. The difference is that he's upping his game of evil masculine towards you, not like the healthy man who ups his game in healthy masculinity for deeper collaboration with your femininity. So, although it seems like he's responding to your femininity as a healthy male, what is actually happening is that you're revisiting that phase from the beginning of the relationship, the phase when he was intentionally idealizing you and you felt like the best thing since sliced bread. But then it will plummet, and your next trip through the abuse cycle will be just a little bit worse than the last one. You can fake romance through fairy tale-like behaviors and actions that mimic eating dinner together. A toxic man does this through reshaping that structure of the table surface and the legs as a distraction. Different style of table, different style of legs, different location of the table. But you can't fake the organic experience of the actual meal unless you're a toddler sharing a tea party, living in the make-believe of immaturity. God tells us through Paul, we move on from the elemental childish things and grow to adults, right? Where there's no food, there's no nourishment and no growth. The more times you sit at an empty table, going through the motions of eating a meal, the more obvious it becomes that you're eating make-believe food. It doesn't matter how new and different the table is. There's never going to be the experience of any kind of meal that's a collaboration of the masculine and feminine to build that one flesh relationship that's filled with affection, romance, and love in order to build all those connections that your feminine heart needs in order to be seen. Hope is deferred again as you clear the table, tidy the kitchen, and do the dishes. The banquet you thought you were invited to has slowly turned from that make-believe food that you thought was nourishing you into begging for scraps of real food from a garbage bin. And in the process, you've been conditioned to think that you must return to this garbage bin and beg for scraps because that's who you really are. You've been conditioned to believe that this is where you belong. But you let everyone think you're at a banquet with Prince Charming. This is inauthentic. You are a daughter of the King of the universe. You're living in a way he did not design you to live. It's not the way he created you to fulfill the plan he created you for. In keeping with the meal metaphor, what food do you like the taste of? What do you like to cook or bake or serve or eat? Moving from food to anything else that's distinctly you. What lights you up? What is something you like? What is something you liked as a little girl that's still inside you, but you're kind of afraid or ashamed to talk about it or even maybe think about it? What do you enjoy looking at? What do you like to see, to hear, to touch? What appeals to your senses are the keys to how God uniquely created you. The trick is to keep drilling down on why. Part of the process of healing and being regenerated by God is finding out your why. What I mean is everything about you. You've got to reverse engineer. I often find myself on Pinterest decorating images, eclectic or bohemian. You'd think this means I want to redecorate, right? It could, I suppose. But I made the realization that I'm always landing on those colors, whether it's the walls, a chest of drawers, or a planter, or a pillow. I feel complete, or at peace, or safe somehow. That's interesting. Why? Because it's uniquely me, and no one is telling me it's not me. No one is criticizing me or trying to lead my thoughts in a different direction. These are the tiny little features that, when you lean into them, they cause huge shifts in your heart, mind, and soul. There's no end goal or outcome. It's more like a meandering in your imagination that you allow to unfold at your heart's pace. You need to get to know you again, the you God created inside of you. Closing thoughts. First, shh. Don't say a word about this to him. Discovering that your husband's dangerous is a scary place to end up. It's never where you thought you'd be, and it feels like an unreality. But your silence about your awareness of what he really is, that's your safety zone. And always remember, a clueless guy that causes dysfunction and seems difficult, he's not dangerous. But the malignant man is not clueless. He just pretends to be difficult and dysfunctional so that he can hide how dangerous he is.